presentation. So, thanks for coming. This presentation is on LiftPort Group and space elevators. This is Michael Laine. He is the president of LiftPort Incorporation, and their idea is to develop commercially an elevator to space. He has over 15 years of business management and development experience in technology, financial, and military markets. And for the past 4 years, he's been devoting himself to space research and development. Prior to this, he was the co-founder and the president of High-Life Systems and received funds from NASA's Institute for Advanced Concepts to build a space elevator. He has a degree in business administration from Boston University. So, ready? Michael Laine.
Show of hands, okay, when you talk about the space elevator. Be candid, be honest. Who thinks I'm the craziest guy in the room? All right, okay, no, that's cool, that's good. I started on this stuff about 9 years ago, and when I asked that question 9 years ago, it was every hand in the room. So we've come a long ways, but sincerely, this is one of those projects that science fiction is so overwhelmed with the facts that there's a lot of misperceptions. We're not out there claiming that we can build this thing in the next 10 minutes. This is not going to replace rockets, okay? Not anytime soon. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. So actually, in the last couple of years, we've come a long ways from the giggle factor is still there, but there's less of it, so that's kind of good here, actually. I'm kind of a relaxed guy. I'm not the kind of guy that has these big, flashy PowerPoints. So we're going to kind of ramble a little bit. I'm much more of a storyteller, so I'm going to give you some basics and background information, and then we're just going to kind of see where the conversation goes. I like SEDS. I like SpaceVision. I have very good memories. I went to the events back in 2003 at MIT, and I'll show you some stuff that we did there. That was a pretty important turning point for us and for our company. Fast forward to, I think, 2005, maybe 2006. Were any of y'all here at Champaign in 2005, 2006? Okay. We sent Tom Nugent, who used to work for me. He was my right arm. He came here and did another demonstration, a big balloon. We'll talk about that in a second. Tom, by the way, is Illinois alum here from Champaign, Urbana. And just about a week ago, he broke a world record by powering a UAV helicopter from the ground with a laser for 12 hours. And that's a big deal. For something that's supposed to have a 5-minute battery lifespan, powered it from the ground for 12 hours. That is a fundamental world-changing technology. And I think it's just the first of ultimately many that will come out of the space elevator. Let's clarify something. I did not actually graduate from Boston University. I missed it by about 6 classes, so I can live with that. But while I was in business school, I didn't do any engineering. I am not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination. I tend to surround myself with very, very smart people, and I do my best to interpret what they say. And that carried it to you guys. Let's talk about the history of the project for a bit. Let's talk about what an elevator to space is, what it's not, because that's also very important. Then I want to put us all on the same page, and then from there we're going to open it up for questions, because there's no PowerPoint I could put together that would actually answer your questions. It's much more interactive. I am the president of LiftPort Group. I'm building a venture capital fund to specifically capitalize space-based technologies, not just for space stuff, but for all of the mundane down-to-earth solutions that space can provide. So that's pretty cool. I'm a director of something that is called the International Center for Nanotech Strength Applications. If you're interested in all the material sciences, and if you all are engineers, you should be interested in material sciences. That should be pretty important to me, and I'm happy to answer questions about nanotech and specifically carbon nanotech work. Just this week, I was elected to be the president of the United States Alumni Association for the International Space University, so that's a brand new position I'm pretty excited about. And 2 weeks ago, I was told I was nominated for the Evil Geniuses for a Better Tomorrow Award. So, pretty peculiar background, pretty peculiar resume, but it's taken me some very interesting places. So let's start with space elevators for a second. By the way, here's all my contact information. I'll put this up a bunch of times. I will not friend you on Facebook. That's I reserve for my actual friends. But LinkedIn or any other source, I'm a very, very, very public guy. Okay? Alright, so what's a space elevator? I'm going to show this video while I'm talking, and then I'll show it a second time and dissect it. So, the concept of an elevator space has been around for a very long time. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, who was really the first rocket pioneer ever, was the guy who actually came up with this idea well over 100 years ago. Imagine you have a ball and a string, and you're spinning it over your head. The string in the middle stays straight, right? If you take that same basic idea, the Earth's rotation with a very long, very strong string attached to a satellite deep out in space, you actually get the same thing. You literally can build an elevator to space. So what we're doing here is, sorry, it's fuzzy voice. What we're going to wind up doing is launching four rockets that have four significant payloads. We've got a rocket engine, two great big spools of thread, and a solar array. So that's a booster. We're going to assemble that at low Earth orbit. And then a lot of things are going to happen all at once. The red is to symbolize that it's a laser on the ground. Instead of having solar panels pointing up towards the sky, we're pointing them down towards the ground and using a laser to beam energy to the system. That drives standard electric motors. We have more energy that we can harness, which allows us to control our speeds better. That's going to drive an electric engine. And then over the period of nearly 3 months, we're going to push slowly out further and further and further out into space and drop a thread, a single strand, back down to the equator. Now, this thread is very, very thin and very, very fragile. It's only a couple inches wide. It's paper thin. And odds are it's going to break. And there's nothing we can do about that. And if it does, we got to start over. So pretty big threat there. As it drops back into the atmosphere, once we get it taut, once we get it all the parts in place and everything's taut, then we have another series of hurdles, because once it comes back down into the atmosphere and we attach it, we're going to attach it down at the equator, directly south of San Diego, directly west of Quito, Ecuador, about 2,300, 3,000 miles away from pretty much everything. The Galapagos Islands are around 900 miles away from this particular zone. We chose this zone because, according to NOAA studies, there's no lightning here. There hasn't been a lightning strike in this location for 10 years ago. That's a very controversial study, by the way, that's not certain that that's true anymore. But there's only 3 days worth of cloud cover per year, so that's also helpful to us. Once we attach it to a ship out there, and by the way, all of these designs are very old. They're 8, 9 years old, so they've changed quite a bit since then. Once we attach it, that first thread's pretty fragile. There's a good chance it's going to break. So immediately what we have to do is start the real construction process. So we're linking back to the Romans. What the Romans would do to build a bridge is they take a bow and arrow, shoot a string across the canyon, and then use that string to pull more and more rope across and ultimately pull boards and build the bridge. We're essentially building a bridge to space. I don't want to simplify it because, you know, it's hard, right? But there's a big difference between impossible, difficult, and really, really difficult. I think we're in the really, really difficult stage, but we're not in the impossible stage. Over about a 3-year period, those lifters that we're just climbing up there, they're adding more threads side by side by side until we have about a 15-foot wide system. At that point, we'll have sent about 300 lifters, those are the robotic cars, we'll have sent about 300 of those lifters up. And so there's always a balance point between how much mass you're putting at the far end of the counterweight and how much thread you're putting on the string. Does that make some sense? All right. So over about a 3-year period, you've built up a counterweight on one end of several hundred, maybe 3, maybe 4 or 500 of these lifter cars that ultimately those are part of the construction process. They become dead weight, but they're an important part of the counterweight. By having that whole system in place, we figure we can move about 100 tons of cargo every week. So compare that to the space shuttle. In some of its best configurations, you're talking about 50, 60, 65 tons, and you're talking about, in its best situation, 5, 6, 7 times a year. So we think we can put a lot of stuff into space. The hyperbole is that we're going to make it, you know, $10 a pound. Well, you know, I'm a capitalist. It's not going to be $10 a pound. Sorry. There's a bunch of misinformation, miscommunication about the system. But that's it in a nutshell. Now, yes, I'm vastly oversimplifying this thing. I'm pretty competent to talk about carbon nanotubes. I'm reasonably competent to talk about robotics. I like robotics, so I'm pretty good with them. I am not competent to talk about lasers. I don't understand how that part of the system works. I'm sorry, I apologize. But I can answer some questions about pretty much the generalities of broad cases. What we want to do with this system ultimately is really revolutionize how we get back and forth to space. And by revolutionizing the method, I think we also wanted to change what we do out there ultimately. So we're all about mass transit, mass transit. That's it for kind of stage 1 of this. Everybody's on the same page. I'm happy to answer questions about basically the whole system or any parts of it. I'm a finance guy, a business guy. I like the fuzzier parts of the problem. The politics, military, those I think are particularly entertaining. But you know, how do you build this thing and why do you build this also? So I'm going to throw out some questions and I'll stop you guys after a while and move on to a different section. But any questions so far? Yeah, you were a skeptic, right? You were one that got sounds crazy? Okay, good. That's just fine.
What does your timeline look like for this?
I'm not evading that question. Let me give you a segue first. So I started this thing I was part of this NASA Institute for Advanced Concepts Research, and I was the #2 guy in 2001. We worked like crazy. We had a pretty small team, and we produced our final report in 2003, just after the Columbia crash. NASA wanted nothing to do with us. Okay, they had other priorities. Rightly so, we were orphaned. We created LiftPort Group as kind of a way of saying, okay, this is too important to just sit on the shelf as another document. another report. In that original report, there were a lot of errors. One of them was claimed that carbon nanotubes would be available in the quantity and quality that we needed within 2 years. It's now 7 years later, and they're not even on the horizon. Okay, so we made claims back in 2003 that were just fiction now. It's easy to recognize that. On that NIAC report, we said 15 years it was doable. And that's, again, fiction. And I apologize because I was a part of that, but I argued against that stuff, those sorts of statements. When LiftPort was created afterwards, the original guy that I was working with, Dr. Edwards, he and I didn't agree on a lot of things, and so we went different directions. Fast forward to 2006, we published something called the Technical Roadmap, where we said, all right, you can't just build an elevator to space. There are steps along the way. What are those steps? And we created a technical roadmap that identified 11 critical technology developments that had to happen. Otherwise, it won't happen. And then these basic project management skills, that goes to 2031. Okay, so the guy who was just talking a little while ago, Eller, was saying what 2030 is going to look like. I think 2030 is going to be a pretty interesting time. So we had said about 2031. Fast forward to April 2007. I used to be rich, and now I'm not, and it's because of the elevator. I used to have a fair amount of wealth in real estate, and I had a pretty healthy net worth. Because we weren't getting NASA funding anymore, I was in a good enough position to just pay for the project. So I had a team of about 14 people, and that was coming out of my real estate assets. You all know what happened to real estate markets. From a finance perspective, having a 51% loan to value is a very safe position to be. And I had millions in assets, so 51% LTV was pretty safe. But the markets imploded, and literally in 24 hours, everything evaporated. So we basically ceased operation in April 2007 and only restarted about 6 months ago. So we're in our very, very first stage of what we jokingly refer to as LiftPort 2.0. But we've basically been stagnant for 3 years. So if you take 2031, add 3 years of being stagnant, plus give me 2 more years because I got to fix stuff that was broken. I'm thinking 2035 time frame. And I think we've got good, realistic steps on that. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but it's not an easy question. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
What's your competition like? Is there anyone else with water?
Unfortunately, there's a lot of. Sure. She asked what our competition was, and is there anybody else in the world doing this? There's a lot of cooperation, but I'm the only crazy one willing to build a company around the idea. There's the International Space Elevator Consortium, which is quite effective. There's the Spacework Foundation in the United States and in Europe, and the Japanese Space Elevator Association. So there's actually quite a bit of, there's a fairly large community that's quite active. I'm a little out of touch, but 3 years ago when LiftPort was active, we had more than 60 different universities doing different aspects of work that we maintained and managed. And there were, we guesstimate somewhere near 800 to 1,200 people working on the project. Now, that number's fallen dramatically, and I'd say best case there's 300 or 400 right now. I think with LiftPort rebuilding, we'll start moving back into that level. But there's no other commercial company tackling this. Let me back up though and say that the rationale for why LiftPort is a commercial company is not the elevator to space. That's a far object in the future. But if you look at lasers, communications, robotics, nanotechnology, material science developments, we figure we can make a bucket of money off the spin-offs. So that's always been our rationale. And even though we imploded, Laser Motive, the guys that just did the UAV laser program, they've done well. The guy who used to work for me, Steven Steiner at MIT, is going off and he's working with a company called Nanocom, which has maybe some of the best nanotech materials in the world. So we are seeing those commercial developments. They're just not controlled by LiftPort. But no, there's no other commercial. Go ahead.
Has your company been pursuing materials other than carbon nanotubes as a possibility for the
Have we been pursuing something other than carbon nanotubes? Short answer, no. But again, there's been a 3-year hiatus and a few things have happened since then. So in 2003, 4, and 5, and 6, we were developing our own carbon nanotube technology. We've taken some stuff from MIT, some ideas at MIT, and some other ideas that were at the National Renewable Energy Lab. And we thought that each of those guys had parts of the pieces of the puzzle, but they weren't talking. And since we were communicating with so many different groups, we thought we saw an answer that they didn't have. So we started the process to create a lab and create a production facility. We were so optimistic that we leased a 100,000 square foot production facility, and it didn't work. Okay? Our company was not big enough to support the tremendous amount of money that needs to go into nanotech development. So we actually killed that. So carbon nanotubes were our only focus. In the last few years, there's been some breakthroughs in graphene, another carbon source, and boron tubes, which are supposed to be pretty interesting, but I don't know enough about either of those to speak credibly about them. Carbon nanotubes appear to be really the only material right now that we think can do it. To put in perspective here, 15,000 years of material sciences, from the bone and stone era to today, right? On a strength spectrum scale, bone and stone is at 0. Fast forward to industrial steel, it's 4 and 5 gigapascals in strength. Carbon nanotubes have already been tested at 63, and they're theorized at 100 GPa, gigapascals of tensile strength. So you're talking about something that is so mind-boggling, it's going to fundamentally change the world, and we've only known about this material for 20 years. So right now we think it's going to be carbon nanotubes. These boron tubes I'm hearing rumor about, but I don't know. Does that answer the question? Yeah.
Given that the International Space Station will be winding down in 10 or 15 or 20 or so years, do you think the development of the space elevator would be a good way of preserving that international collaboration?
I would hope so. I mean, we've developed this. Sorry, can the elevator be used as a tool for international collaboration? Yeah, I mean, we've always operated that way. That's why there are so many different organizations working on different parts of it. We mostly worked in the United States, but you know, that's one of the reasons I went to ISU, right, to build those links. Just to name a few of the schools, we have MIT, Harvard, Stanford, University of Washington, University of Texas, UC Boulder, University of Washington, just a bunch. But they were mostly in the States. Canada, strangely enough, because of the Space Elevator Games, have gotten pretty involved. Are you all familiar with the Space Elevator Games, Centennial Challenges? Okay, so in 2003, 2004, NASA put out a call for, they had looked at the success of the X Prize Foundation and they said, well, you know, we can do that. So why don't we create a set of competitions, difficult challenges that can be emulated? And so the Centennial Challenges program came together, and I and about 200 other people all went out to DC to petition for our particular interest. And what happened out of that was NASA selected 2 elevator technologies. Now, they're going to disavow all knowledge of space elevators. That's their job. There's nothing wrong with that. But they will say that the material sciences needed to build an elevator have applications in rockets. That's a good thing. Have applications in aerospace. That's a good thing. So they're going to push forward material sciences. They also are saying that power beaming, you all should look into laser launch concepts for rocketry. Very interesting. Power beaming is a cool technology that NASA can also use. One of the ideas that they considered was you go up to Mars or Moon or something, and you drop basically a power pedal where the whole thing unfolds, and the whole thing is basically a solar panel, and then something pops up out of the edge of it and points a laser at a rover. The rover can go all over the place. It's speedier, it's faster, it's more maneuverable. So it's not tied to a central location. It doesn't have to do like the Mars rover does and keep all of its power on its back. So NASA's willing to support the technologies, but not the overall big program, which is appropriate. So they've offered a couple $1 million in prizes for strong string and power beam. Okay. Next. Yeah, go ahead.
So once the elevators kind of like come to life, then what type of payloads do you anticipate bringing to space?
Okay, I think big, right? Otherwise I wouldn't be on this project. So I really like the idea of space-based solar power. I don't think it's practical with rocket technology. I don't think you can make the numbers work. Building enormous solar arrays that can power planets, it's really hard, and it takes a lot of juice. So I think elevators are the perfect tool for that. I don't think it can be done beforehand. But I also want to see colonization on the moon and settlement on Mars. I mean, look, you guys are space geeks. For whatever reason, whatever your background is, I don't think you got into this to go to Leo. That's my assumption. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't get into this to just go around in circles. No offense to going around in circles because I haven't done it and I'd like to. But I don't want to do just that. So I built the elevator to do big things. I see Brad Edwards, the original NIAC guy, got in touch with me because my first space company was called 1,000 Planets, with the idea of colonization of 1,000 planets, moons, and space stations. So I've only ever been a big fan of this. I drank the Kool-Aid, man. I do. Yeah.
With space tourism starting to increase in popularity, how do you see this interacting with that or branching off into the space tourism sector?
Yeah, see, they're a skeptic. I think the hype around space tourism is vastly overbuilt. I think there's a market, and I think it's a stepping stone. I think it's an important stepping stone. But I don't believe ultimately. I think the space tourism market will last a very short time, in the sense of there's a limited number of people in the world that can spend $200,000 for a trip, regardless of how cool that's going to be. When they actually get up there, they're only spending 4 minutes in weightlessness, and that's not very different from spending 15 or 20 minutes in a zero-G capsule for 1/20th the price. I think some people are going to be surprised and disappointed, and there may be some backlash. might be a curmudgeon on that. I think it's great that it's catalyzing an industry. I think it's great that commercial companies are going after it because I think it's low-hanging fruit. But I don't think it's a sustainable low-hanging fruit. So I want to see whatever the next thing is. And I think that's probably something to do with the CubeSats, although my crystal ball's pretty fuzzy on that. Does that make some sense? Like, I don't want to sound negative around space tourism. I want to go as badly as anybody else does. But I don't think it's a 15-year tool. I think we've got about a 5-year window where it's going to be the coolest thing ever. And then you're going to have to jump to something else really cool. That's my hunch. So, yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of CubeSats, they're becoming more and more popular, and people are thinking that that will be a thing in the future. They don't have any sort of navigation or control over them, so they're basically another piece of space.
Yeah, I know.
How are you going to do that?
We're not going to launch CubeSats when we get our elevator built. Seriously, you know, back to that original study. Back to that original study, when we did this thing, there were a known number of orbital debris objects out there. Fast forward to when the Chinese did their ASAT test, depending on which source you're looking at, there's 50 to 200,000 new objects up there. We thought we had a handle on it when it was 15 or 20,000 objects. I am not entirely convinced the elevator can be built at all anymore because of that debris problem. So, frankly, 1 more, 10 more, 100 more CubeSats is a blip on a much bigger problem. You know, I think CubeSats are going to be a big deal, but I think we've got a much bigger problem. Because at least a CubeSat's going to be registered. And depending on its altitude, it's not going to be a long life item like some of those things are. So, CubeSats have got a lot going for them. They're not the hazard that they're going to be like other debris. Just to clarify, one of the reasons we're on a ship in the first place is specifically for that. So we want to be able to move the ship, and that means pulse the ribbon, and that means we can dodge debris. We'll track the debris, the direction it's coming, the trajectory it's on, and then by moving the ship, we move the ribbon, and that lets the debris go right over us. So, not easy, but doable. Yeah.
Michael, have you considered the potential of, it seems like if you get to the space elevator time frame, it could also be the time frame where you're humanity's brought the asteroid back, or is doing asteroid mining, so there are resources for the material that we want in space is there to start with. Have you thought about that aspect of it, and perhaps more in a way of bringing things down as opposed to bringing things up?
We have, but not asteroids. That's going to be a whole nother zone of commercial activity. My hunch is that whatever we capture in space, we'll use in space. We won't bring that stuff back down. I don't think we're going to bring asteroids and minerals back down to Europe. I think we are going to develop a manufacturing base up there. So let's talk carbon nanotubes for a second. The hyperbole is that they're 100 times stronger than steel, 100 to 1,000 times more electrically conductive than copper and gold, and they're extraordinarily thermally conductive. So they've got some great properties here, and they're going to wind up being built in a lot of things. But it's very difficult to build this stuff because you're literally manufacturing at the atomic level. And you need atomic level purity if you're going to get the results that you want. So where can you go that can create atomic level purity? Go to space. Build carbon nanotubes in space. I think you're going to wind up doing a lot of stuff like that. Pharmaceuticals, those sorts of things. I don't think that's yet. I think there's some real markets there. Rocks, we got rocks. We got a lot of rocks. We may not have enough rare earth rocks, but we have a lot of rocks. Unless we find the right rock out there and are able to bring it back, I don't see the demand for an asteroid being sufficient to bring it all the way back down and harvest it back on Earth. But I think there is a huge manufacturing market. Yeah.
Another timeline question.
Okay.
When should we start looking for carbon nanotubes commercially available?
Oh, dude. Okay, do not tweet this, do not blog this, I'm not going on record for making another mistake. 7 years ago, we said 2 years. The project I'm working on with the International Center for Nanotech Strength Applications, what it's doing right now, I just checked with them this morning, is that they're calling, there's about 60 major universities that are focusing on nanotubes. But most of them, and this has something to do with how the National Nanotech Initiative of $4.5 million is funded, most of that nanotech work, or nanotube work, is being focused on the electrical properties. We're very, very close. Did you all know we're very, very close to breaking Moore's Law, repealing Moore's Law? We've probably only got about 3 to 6 more iterations on silicon chips before Moore's Law is physically impossible. We are going to break it if we stay on the same chip. So IBM and Intel and all the semiconductor companies, they're literally pouring billions into the electrical applications of nanotubes. That's going to be great for mass production, so they'll solve one problem. It will not, there's almost no work being done on the strength applications because there's been such a driver on the electrical. So there's very few people, very few organizations working on the mechanical properties. So when we said 2 years ago, when we said 2 years, 7 years ago, we were wrong. And so if I say 2 years today, I'm also going to be wrong. So what the Nanotech Center is working on right now is to do a survey of all the people who are working on nanotubes and say, all right, what are you working on? What successes have you had? And what do you think production is going to be like? We're going to release a report, by the way. I'll take email addresses if you want. We're going to release a report in January about the state of the art of carbon nanotubes. So today I don't have an answer. By January we will. Because January is the 20th anniversary of the discovery of carbon nanotubes. It's an appropriate time to do a state of the art survey. I'll ask one more question, then I'm going to switch gears for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was curious. You mentioned how much of the conductive carbon nanotubes are, and basic carbon motor final altitude of the elements of the altitude that just in any hazards, we can have something like a bunch of current going through this. It basically surrounded by this space environment.
Sure.
Application.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think people in the elevator community minimize the hazards of electrical problems. There's kind of two camps here. I'm just going to use electric as the simplest example. There's many. There's two camps here. Equally credentialed folks on both ends. They violently disagree. One group says we will never build this because as we drop the string through the sky, we're going to build up charge, and the moment it hits something, we're going to fry our string. Okay? And no matter how many times we keep dropping string down, we're just going to continue to fry it. We'll never be able to connect it, which means we'll never build it. That's one camp. Second camp says, no big deal. It's very conductive. It's extraordinarily long, so the charge, so the length, 100,000 kilometers. Okay? It's extraordinarily long, so a charge on 100,000 kilometers is really not that big a deal. So I'm not qualified to say what the answer is. I think one side is vastly minimizing the problem, and I hope the other side's wrong, right? So I don't know. I think that there's it's really unprofessional to be a speaker with your cell phone going on. Okay, if you guys have your cell phones going off, it's like, oh, okay, you know. But that's sorry. So I lost everything I was saying. Sorry, moving on. Sorry, guys. So I want to show you a bunch of pictures of this stuff. What time is it? How much time do I have? There's no clock in here? Okay. All right.
12:13 right now.
Thank you. All right, so
12:30.
I'm only showing this because I think it's cool. I'm not even sure how this is relevant. My friend sent it to me, and I think it's just kind of neat. It's basically trying to show the linkages between the kinds of technologies that we're developing and how it applies to everybody. This is only a minute long. But one of the things I really like about this is that space is a part of everybody's everyday life, and they just don't know it. I swear to God, I would not want to drive a car that didn't have NASA technology behind it. I would be scared to death to go to a hospital that didn't have NASA technology standing behind it. And most people never get that message. Most people don't understand that when you go to an ATM or turn on the internet, space is related in that transaction. And I think it's really important to get out there and tell the story. Now, maybe you're not the craziest guy in the room like I am, but y'all will mostly work on normal, rational space programs. Y'all need to be able to articulate what it is you're doing to somebody who doesn't have an aerospace degree. You need to be able to tell them what you're doing, which is all by itself difficult, but you need to be able to tell them why you're doing it. In the States, the National Rifle Association has 1 million members. They can sway public opinion and politicians, and they can move our country one way or the other. Space has more people employed, but we don't have a voice, and we dang sure don't have a common message. So please just kind of think about that for a minute and help us come up with a common message, because our story is important and we're being marginalized. End of first public service announcement. There's more contact information, so there's 4, and moving on to, where's my video? That's my phone. All right, so let me set the stage. SEDS 2003, MIT. SEDS is just restarting. I guess they had had a hiatus for a while, and it's just kind of getting rebuilt. So they bring a bunch of folks together, and General Pete Warden was there. I don't think he was director of NASA Ames yet. I think he was still in Arizona, but I'm not sure. But we're trying to do some pretty interesting stuff. And one of the things they asked us to do was do robotic. So what we did is we put a cantilevered arm out the side of the Green Building. Anybody been to MIT? It's a 17-story building. Okay, MIT. It's November, because that's when the SpaceVision is, and it's cold. It's just the beginning of a 4-hour, 5-inch dump of snow. And they're like, hey, can you bring your robots out? So what we're doing is we're all about hard work, right? We test and develop, and we're all about hard work. So we're just about to do this, and campus security is like, 50-pound robot, crowd below you with a bunch of kids, maybe not a good liability situation. So they require us to put a safety line on the string. Well, it's hard to see here, but the wind is spinning between 5 and 15, 5 and 25 miles an hour. And so what happens when you have two strings in wind, right? They tangle. So our bot is climbing up in this environment, and the strings tangle only about 40, 50 feet off the ground. And I've got the radio on, and I'm about to call, a board to sorry, we just embarrass ourselves. It's a little hard to tell. There's about 100 people on the ground. There's hundreds inside. Obviously, they were the smart MIT kids. We're about to be embarrassed in front of this really important crowd. By the way, I do believe that you are a really important crowd. So the robot is stuck because it's gotten caught on the safety line. And our bot breaks the safety line and continues climbing up the string. We are very happy about that. The mechanism here is pretty basic. This is, we've built 18 robots. This is maybe number 5. I'll show you number 2 in a second. This one is really basic. You've got a bunch of wheel treads, a battery pack in the middle. This is a dumb bot. This has almost no brain cells. Has a little bit of communications, but it's basically the same robot you can build at any campus, anywhere in the country. Tread tires, pushed against a string, climbing back and forth.
What's the string composed of?
It's not carbon nanotubes. So I'm a capitalist and I'm cheap, right? I'm basically funding this thing. We went to Lowe's hardware store and got fiberglass. Drywall. When you drywall a house, you have to put a fiberglass tape down the center of it. That's fiberglass tape. We have moved on. This is, I guess that's robot number 7. Robot number 5. Nope. All right, we're going to fast forward. This is robot number probably 9 or 10. And it's actually the last good one that we've got good video for. Same string though, right? Same string. You'll see the marks here. Oh, sorry. You'll see a bunch of stuff here. One, that big white spot is a balloon that's about the size of that screen. Helium balloon. You'll notice it goes from orange to yellow back and forth. The FAA requires that you mark this thing. Because what happens if a plane flies into it? Everybody's going to have a really bad day. So every 50 feet is marked. Now, you guys know and I know that no pilot in the world is ever going to see that string. But that was the only requirement the FAA had for us at that time. This is only a 1,000-foot test. This was supposed to be a mile-high test. Lesson I'm about to tell you is test what you use, not what you think you're going to use. Okay? We had taken a string and we had spray painted it with an acetone-based paint. Well, this was supposed to have 3 of those great big balloons attached to the string, except that the acetone ate through the fiberglass structure, and we almost lost our entire equipment. That, by the way, is nearly $5,000 worth of helium. And so our guys are like leaping to grab the safety line to not lose everything that we got. Could have been a very bad day. It turned out to be a 1,000-foot test because that's all we were willing to risk with the safety line. We've gotten past safety lines. Like when you go to a mile, the safety line is no longer an asset, it's a liability. We've gone as high as a mile for 6 hours. We've gone for 60 days, but only at 300 feet. And so we were at the stage when everything kind of collapsed for us, where we were going to start combining those two, endurance and altitude. North Carolina State University and Rutgers were co-designing a 6-mile high system, 10-kilometer system. By the way, that's a really difficult challenge. How cold does it get 6 miles up? Pretty cold, right? So now you're starting to deal with material problems, you're dealing with battery problems, and it just becomes a mounting headache very quickly. This I was going to show you. Y'all, I'm sorry? Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
You said you're gonna have a string that the robots would take up to reinforce the line. How are they gonna attach it? Or would they?
It's not the attaching at the top that's the hard part, because then that's just going to be an attachment on the spool, and the robot will just stop at the top. It's attaching it side to side that's really the challenge. Because this by itself has, it's going to have its own structural changes. It's going to change based on thermal properties, for example. When you put them side by side and try to zip them together somehow, now you just really increase the problem, because this is going to be differently than this, and then you've got a composites problem that gets compounded very quickly. And if you have 15 feet of that, all at varying widths, it becomes very problematic, and we don't know the answer to that question. Attaching it to the top is easy, because that's just how you attach it to the spool that you build it. Does that make sense? Anything else? I'm going to switch gears for a second and talk about venture capital. I know that that's really not what you're mostly interested in, so I'll keep that brief. But around us, everywhere we look, everywhere we go, space technology is prevalent. And we're probably aware of it, but most people are not. I believe that space technology is a force for good in the world, and it will fundamentally change the world that we live in. I think clean water is really important. Y'all will too if you go 3 days without it. And only a small fraction of the world has clean water that they can depend on. And it's a luxury we really take for granted. Same thing with electricity. Only 1/4 of the world's population has consistent, available 24-hour electricity. Those sorts of things, they matter. I mean, it's the difference between the haves and the have-nots, and we're lucky enough to be the haves. But space technology can broaden that and give a lot more people, help a lot more people become the haves. And I wonder how many Einsteins and Mozarts are in villages we've never heard of, in places we've probably never been to, that don't have water, that don't have electricity, and they could contribute to the world that we live in, but there's no mechanism for them to contribute with, because they're basically dealing with survival issues. I think space technology has the capacity to make a major difference in the world. So yeah, it's cool to work on these widgets, but the technologies we build for up there have direct application down here. So that's one of the reasons why I created a venture capital fund. Was Silicon Valley does a very good job at funding software companies. what I call ones and zeros companies. They don't actually make anything. Who is it? Somebody said something, there's a difference between bits and bits and bits and atoms or something. Anyway, somebody said something clever about that, which I remember. One of our speakers, anyway. I think if you're going to make something, whether it's a pen or a space station, ultimately that's harder than writing code. I'm not discounting writing code. It's a critical part of our world. But Silicon Valley, the venture capital community, does not fund hardware. If you're a laser company, you've got a really important laser technology, you're not getting funded through the traditional Silicon Valley method. You're dang sure not going to get funded unless you happen to be Elon Musk through the venture capital community for space technologies. I'm curious, how many business folks do we have here? Just a few. Okay. It's easy to take the engineering for granted, but somebody ultimately has to pay for it. So I think you guys should just think about who pays for your salary and ultimately what do they want from it. Just kind of think about that in the background. I think that's pretty much all I've got. I'm going to brag for a second. I got to go to the non-launch a couple days ago. I got really close to that thing. That is awesome. I mean, really. I've been in the space biz for 10 years. I've never seen a launch ever. And it was pretty cool. If you guys do get to go down there, pull every string you've got to get on some of the tours, some of the VIP tours. Some of those tours they're amazing. So, any questions about any of this stuff? Okay, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.